In cases where if we're doing a negotiation and we're going to reduce a charge or drop a charge that involves some restitution, we always include that as part of the agreement. We can't make the charges come back because jeopardy is attached, but it's a probation violation. And so we can further sanction them down the road.
Well, you know, my case, what they did, they made it a civil judgment.
Well, and that's the other problem is.
So it's up to me to go collect, you know.
These, as long as they're on probation.
Yeah, I'm going to go confront this guy who owes me money for a crime he committed against me.
Sure. Put yourself in danger. Who knows what you're going to do.
And we know that's a little bit of an empty promise, but, you know, maybe if they own a house and someday.
You get.
But the reality is that many of those folks, they don't have the ability to pay back the restitution. So it is an empty promise, and there's really nothing I can do to collect that part of it. As to testifying, the vast majority of victims are willing to testify. They're willing to come to court and testify. You know, there are a few cases, and, you know, maybe our shootouts have been a couple of those where it's bad guys shooting at bad guys, and getting the actual victim in there to testify sometimes is a little bit more challenging. But the vast majority of our victims are willing to testify, and they do come in and testify. And that's the first chance that they have to be part of the process, but it's a very short part, and it's just come back and tell your story again. And obviously, 95% of the cases never go to trial.
Now, why is that? We were talking about
honestly,
that.
it's because they're guilty.
Olmsted County just doesn't have trials anymore.
Nobody does. I mean, we have more trials here than the vast majority of counties around us. But
is that a cost-saving measure?
No.
Or?
Well, no, they're guilty.
They're guilty.
But you
and
say
so
they're charged with about 10 criminal counts, and then as a plea deal, a bunch of those are dismissed.
What we look
How does
at,
that work?
What we look at is we try and get a plea to one of the top counts. And, you know, when we charge somebody, we often charge the same behavior 2 or 3 different ways. DWI is a good example. If they're caught driving and they're over 0.08, we charge them with being over the legal limit, and we also charge them with driving under the influence. 2 ways of charging the same thing. We don't need a conviction.
You do that so one of them sticks.
Right. It's just a different way to present the same evidence, and often, you know, if it's just a different way to present the same evidence.
Because you have one crime and then 2 counts, and one of them would
one course of conduct. And so, you know, so often, for example, burglary. In order to be a burglar, you have to enter a house and commit a crime. So we charge both the burglary and the internal crime. Well, we only need the conviction on the burglary. And if we were to get the conviction on the internal crime, which we sometimes do, the penalty for that is subsumed by the burglary. So we're looking to get one sanction out of this course of conduct. And so when we're negotiating cases, we take that into consideration. You know, what can we get out of this that's going to kind of resolve the whole thing and get the appropriate sanction for the whole course of conduct. Obviously, if victims are involved, we want to make sure victims know and that we're trying to get the restitution for them if it's possible. Again, often it's just simply not.
Sometimes these victims, though, are afraid to come in because they know this person probably will be out shortly.
If it's like an assault case,
especially if it's an assault case or some kind of
a
where they've got friends
or
maybe it was a
what
group
about
of people, and what kind of protection
or sexual assault cases where the woman has to come in public.
I mean, I can see where people would be afraid to go testify in public anyway against these people, and of course you can't do it in private because they know who testified against them.
It's a system, and while that doesn't happen that often, I guess. Most of our victims are willing to come in and testify no matter what the case is. We have other protections in place to make sure that they're not going to be further harmed or, and certainly victims of personal crimes, person crimes. We have a victim services department that we've got an array of services we can help them. But that goes back to this concept of what it's like to be a victim. And we as prosecutors and people in the system need to be mindful that we don't forget that we don't forget that there was a person involved in this. It's rare, it's the few drug cases and a lot more than a few, but it's the drug cases and some other types of cases that don't really involve a person. But that's the vast majority of our cases do involve people as victims, and we need to be mindful of that. And